Welcome to Don't Turn Around, a podcast about the extraordinary and the unexplained and the often profound impact these events have on our lives. This is a space for amazing stories and explorations of the paranormal as it relates to the human experience. And if you've had an experience and you'd like to share it, please don't hesitate to shoot me a note at dtapodcastinfo@gmail.com. Tonight's guest is one of the most well-respected investigators in the field, and rightfully so. He has investigated with the biggest names in the industry on the major cable networks, most recently co-starring and executive producing one of the best paranormal shows out there. And while he learned from the greats, he has an investigative approach and style that is all his own. His new book, Goodbye Hello, is a must-read for any paranormal enthusiast, anyone curious about paranormal investigation, and anyone who has or is experiencing grief. Hands down, Goodbye Hello is a unique exploration of ghosts, love and friendship, life and death, and self-awareness, delivered in a sincere and compelling voice. When he isn't looking for spirits, he is the executive director of Peregrine Theater Ensemble, a nonprofit theater company based in Provincetown, Massachusetts. This educational summer theater program produces some of the most spectacular musicals and plays on the Cape while also nurturing young actors in a professional working environment, which is pretty incredible. He also sits on the board of directors for Tim's Fund, a nonprofit scholarship program created to support social activists who change the world through art, music, literature, and filmmaking. Adam Berry, welcome to Don't Turn Around.
Thank you. And I won't. I'm not going to look behind me. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
We're going to save that. We're going to ask you that again in the end, and we'll see if you change your mind.
For sure.
It's an absolute pleasure and great excitement for me to have you on the show. I came across, I knew you from Ghost Hunters and all that wonderful stuff. But I think I really fell in love with you and your partnership with Amy and everything that you guys were doing during the pandemic when I said, you know what, I haven't checked out Kindred Spirits, and we got sucked into it, and it was at just the right time for us going through the pandemic and other challenging life stuff. It was just such a beautiful thing that happened for us, and it kind of led to me really investing in this podcast, investing in getting out there, forming a team, and doing some investigations. And so I just, before I don't have the chance, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work and energy and positivity that you're putting out there into this field.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Honestly, without those that, tune into what we do, we wouldn't be able to do it. I think the pandemic, it's what's crazy is as much as I hated the pandemic, as much as I still hate it, it sort of saved us in a way, because it was the time when linear television was moving to streaming and people didn't know what to watch and how to watch it. But because we were forced to, because we had you in handcuffs and you had to be in your house and there was nothing else to do, it really saved us in a way where people were watching it, they were commenting, and it actually propelled us to the next level. And we merged and we went to streaming and we survived that. So, thank you first and foremost. So please.
No, thank you.
No, thank you, doctor.
I love it. So I'm going to try to keep us on track here tonight. Whatever track is, there are so many topics I want to cover with you. We actually, my wife and I have this concept that we've come up with. Who are the people of, celebrity or otherwise, that we just want to hang out with? Who would be around the table? And we've got like Mark Ruffalo. We've got, who else? Well, we've got you and we've got Amy are at the table. Some of our real world people are at the table as well. But I want you to know that you made the cut.
Thank you
for the table. So
I appreciate it.
Yes.
I
See,
appreciate it.
I'm already going like way off of center here.
That's fine. Listen, I don't know. I don't know how long the podcast is. This may be hours. We just
Adam,
don't know.
it's going to have to be as long as it's going to have to
Yeah,
be.
that's what I always say. It's like I don't know how long it is.
Yeah,
It's as long as it's gonna be.
this is my evening. You're my evening tonight. So I always like to start at the beginning, and I know you've shared the beginning on other shows, and it's in the book, but it's a lovely beginning. And interestingly, and we'll get to it, but there were some strange coincidences. I won't quite go out as far to say synchronicities,
Mhm.
but different points in the book where there were these key words that related to some um, very big things in my own life.
Mhm.
And so we'll talk about that. But
Yeah.
let's go to the beginning. Let's go back to Bluff Street and your experiences that
Whoa.
began this journey.
Yeah. Um. Wow. I mean, we're going way back. We're going back to fetus stage. No, I mean technically. So, I want people to read the book, obviously. So,
Yes, of course.
I will give high level Bluff
Yes,
Street things.
perfect.
Um.
And everyone here knows I have a strict spoiler policy.
Yeah. Yeah. Spoiler
I
alert.
I am very
Yeah.
very
Yeah. I get
focused
it.
on not getting those spoilers out.
I get it, but listen, I'm the culprit of like just telling everything all at once. So I can't
Yeah,
listen. I can't promise anything. Um, Bullet points you need to know. Uh, I grew up in Alabama, in Florence, Alabama, and Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Those of you who don't know what Muscle Shoals is, just Google the Netflix documentary Muscle Shoals. It'll tell you a lot about my upbringing and where I lived.
noted, noted.
Um, I enjoyed where I grew up. It was all about music and culture and art. When I told my parents I wanted to be a singer, when I told people around me that I want to be a singer, I'm going to go to theater school. Everyone said, "Yeah, you could do that," because of the town I grew up in. It was musically oriented. It was the Music Hall of Fame is there. There are so many great musicians and writers. But before that, I grew up on Bluff Street in Florence. My parents moved into this rental house because they wanted to start a family. They rented it from the man who was friends of Santa Claus, um, and he lived
Spoiler
there.
alert.
He lived there with his wife. And Santa Claus told my father. Santa Claus told my father that the house was haunted before they even moved in, and that is the craziest statement, but it's true.
I love that statement.
It's so true.
Can you put
And
that on a t-shirt? Can you
yeah,
put that
Santa
statement
Claus
on a
told
t-shirt,
my
please?
father the house was haunted.
Yeah.
And like any good horror movie, like A24 style, they moved
Mm,
right on in because they
yeah.
were like, we're going to raise a family. And they had heard the stories, which, they said there was the ghost named, a woman named Gertrude that lived there. Uh, the craziest thing they ever experienced was a mirror going across, ending up across the room. Uh, when they left the previous family, when they left, there was a mirror across the room. Nothing was disturbed on the table that the mirror was on. It's just bizarre and crazy. We moved in. I had experiences as a child. I always thought somebody was going down into the basement. I always there was a ghost dog, which was my
Mhm.
first paranormal experience, which I think is pretty interesting in the sense when people talk about their first experience, it's never usually an animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the animal was this dog. It was scratching on my bathroom door, and it would walk in, and you could hear the nails on the hardwood floor. You could hear the collar, the dog tag,
Yeah.
and then when it got to the television in front of my bed, the television would glow a little bit because what this was. Oh God, how old are you? 6, 7, 8, 9. I mean, we're talking 89,
Okay.
80,
Yeah,
89,
so they
88, 89, 90.
still had the tubes,
Right, the tube TV that
dials, if it was an
you
older TV,
you'd
right.
press in the button and the TV would glow a
Yo,
little bit,
yes,
and
yes,
you'd
yes.
watch it. I would sit and watch the glow
Yeah,
disappear.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So it would glow every time the sound got to it, and then it would dissipate. And like I rationalized it. I thought it was my aunt. Maybe she was here with the dog, but that made no sense. We didn't have any pets.
Right.
I immediately got to a point where I was like, I don't like this. I don't understand this. And so I said, stop out loud.
Yeah.
And the activity completely stopped. I told my mother about it, and that's when she was like, "Well, I guess, I mean, you came up to me and you said this house was haunted, and you told me about this dog, so I guess it was." Like, they were so far, they were like in their early, well, by this point, they were almost 40,
Yeah.
raising two kids in a rental house where they wanted to move out of and buy their own home. They had no time for ghosts.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they didn't, I thank them to this day for not like pushing those feelings aside, saying you're crazy, like that's not real. They didn't say anything like that. They were just
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh,
It's not the common, the playbook, the parent playbook, go to page 7, line 4. It's the pipes.
yeah,
It's the
yeah,
pipe.
yeah."
Yeah.
It was just okay, 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 right?
Yeah.
And I would always say like, "Who's going down in the basement?" But they're both sitting here. My mother's makeup had moved, and it wasn't me. It wasn't my brother, and it was just things that would disappear that seemed, like Gertrude might have wanted this.
Yeah.
But what's crazy about the whole experience on Bluff Street is I cap it with, I didn't know that they were told it was haunted. I did not know that things had been missing. I did not know that the ghost that they were told was in that house was very similar to someone who would create the activity that we were experiencing,
Right. Of course.
until 2 years ago when I started really working on the book and
Yeah.
interviewing my parents. And
Yeah.
that to me blows my mind. It's like, I had these experiences. I told my mother about them. We sort of, I find myself all these years later writing a book about my experiences. And then they're like, "Oh, yeah, this also happened, and this also happened, and this also happened." And I'm like, to me, it was a discovery and it blew my mind.
It's yeah, I mean, it's mind-blowing when you when there's this whole narrative that underscores the experience growing up that you were aware of. But you were aware of you had your own narrative with this experience, and then when let's come together, it's gotta be one of those
Yeah.
moments that just
And
gives you pause.
what's so interesting is the most terrifying thing that happened in that house was, you know, hearing the Wicked Witch of the West in the Wizard of Oz movie in the background when I'm trying to go to sleep. Like, that was more terrifying to me as a kid
Yes.
than any of the activity I was experiencing, which probably makes, I don't know what that means. But like, when I think about what people are like, "Well, what was scary for you in that house?" The things that were scary were the things that were made up by Hollywood. And as
Yes.
a kid, when you're seeing them, especially that witch and which is one of my favorite movies, but like,
Yes.
just hearing her in the background, I just remember there were one point I was, trying to go to sleep. It was like 7 o'clock. The sun was still out. It was summer. I was a child, but I remember being really afraid of hearing the witch and the Wizard of Oz in the other room because it was just on like television,
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the scariest thing that happened. The ghosts were not, I just lived with them, if that
Yeah.
made sense.
No, that makes perfect sense, and it's funny because I didn't have as quite dramatic of experience. At least when I was younger, I had a couple things happen as a teenager. But even still, if someone were to ask me, growing up, what was the scariest thing you ever witnessed? What do you profoundly, what do you remember? And it was Michael Jackson's Thriller video. The first time I saw it, that straight messed me up for weeks. It was a
Incredible.
mess. Yeah.
You
Even
know
like,
what? And on the flip side, on the flip side, growing up in Muscle Shoals,
yeah,
where like people wrote music for Michael, where they wrote music
yeah,
for,
yeah, yeah,
they were living in that world. My mother would be like, "Oh, there are 8 dancers from Alabama that are in this music video." She'd be like, "There are 8 dancers in this music video from Alabama." So me as a kid, I'd be like, "Oh, cool. I could
yeah,
do something
yeah,
like
yeah,
this." Like, it's almost like I could not, this isn't scary. Like, this is something that could be
yeah,
achievable because 8
yeah.
dancers from Alabama
Well,
are
yeah,
in this movie with
yeah,
Michael.
yeah. That's, oh, I love it. I love it. Gosh, I mean, and those some of those are my most vivid
Yeah,
memories
of
too.
course.
And I don't look back at it like, oh, poor little me was frightened. I look back at it with a smile on my face, and I'll tell you today, sitting down and watching a scary movie or playing a scary video game, I feel way more fear than when I'm out in the field, talking to the
I'm
shadows.
sorry. I'm sorry. Um, Little Nightmares. Little Nightmares. Have you? I mean, you played
It's
all the series, right?
no,
It
it's in my
is
pile. It's in my to play
how
pile.
skip forward, fast
Okay.
forward. because we've played all the versions back when the PS5 came out, and we
Mhm.
snagged one of those. It was like early pandemic, probably 20, it was probably 2020, 2021.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, we played those. If we had made a Twitch channel, my husband and I, two gay men screaming at each other about what is about to happen and like not running fast enough, it would have been viral. We
Oh,
would be
yeah.
millionaires by now, but we didn't because we were sitting in our little hobbit hole of an apartment screaming at each other about not running fast enough from the chef people or
Oh,
like it's just it's I am more terrified of video games that I scream at or like horror movies.
yeah.
I have to walk around the room and like watch from a distance. That's me. That's me.
Yeah, well, and that's the way to do it, as a family, like, we love watching horror movies together. Everyone has their different, style. My one daughter will be very, won't move an inch.
Yeah.
Uh, my wife is kind of the same, and then my younger daughter, Piper, and we are very, she'll jump and it'll make me jump, I'll jump and she'll jump.
Yeah. I'll start saying things like, um, wow, this is shot really well, or like they're such a good actress. Like we just started rewatching Haunting of Hill House again, which
Oh,
is to
yeah.
me, I
Mm,
mean, one of, if not the best horror series ever made
yeah,
for any platform.
yeah.
It is so freaking well done. And like we were watching it, we just kept saying, God, she's such a good actress. God, she's such a good actress. But in also, I'm going, nope, can't watch this. I hate this part. I have to go away. I can't see this Hat Man. I don't want to see.
Yeah, see, my phrase is usually, "Wow, the sound design is really
Really
amazing. This
good. Yeah,
sound
yeah.
design is really
It's
good."
really good. The surround sound works. Darling, dear heart, the sound, thank
Oh,
you for like, let's get it works.
yeah. So let's fast forward, and
Yeah,
I'm gonna paraphrase,
I'm ready.
part of your adventures, right? So, second season, Ghost Hunters Academy, slam dunk, and sort of the turning point for you was why focus on this, prize at the end? I'm having this incredible experience. I'm going to be present and take it for the moments that I'm getting from this, and that
Mhm.
really flung those doors open for you. And it's funny because and I wasn't going to admit this, but I decided I will.
Please, 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 please. You send in a tape.
No, I didn't.
Oh,
It's actually, now it's going to be a bit underwhelming, but I'll say it anyway.
that's okay. Say it. Say it. Say it. Say it.
So earlier tonight, I was honestly feeling more than a little bit starstruck and a little bit nervous, a little bit
Oh.
nervous. And then I said, well, you know, in Adam's book, he's talking about this experience of being just feeling tense and overwhelmed. And then the second he just said, hey, I'm just going with it.
Mhm.
And that's what I said tonight. I said, you know
Yeah.
what? I've been doing this for forever. I'm just going to go with it. And that's one of the beautiful things about this book is there's these big concepts in there, right? But then there's these gems, these gems of just knowledge and experience that you can apply to just about any experience in your life, not having to do with life, death, or ghosts.
Mhm.
And we'll get back to that too, but that's one of the things I think that makes this such a important read for people.
Yeah.
So you slide through, you're in taps now, and you think you're doing 6 episodes. Surprise, 600 episodes later, right? And I know that's an exaggeration, but it became you became a regular member of that cast, and you were paired up with Amy
Mhm.
very early on, and this beautiful friendship and working relationship blossomed.
Mhm.
And and I love that. I love that story because she was always one of my favorites, and I always would joke. I said she has the best sense of style out of everyone on Taps, and
Yeah.
so when you guys connected, and that was fantastic. So now you're moving into the Kindred Spirits era.
Mhm.
You decide that the road and the lifestyle and what you are getting out of the style of investigating that you have to do for the network. I know there's certain parameters, right? When you're with a network and with an established team, that you have to adhere to. And
Mm,
so you made the decision. I know how I want to do this, and I know what is filling my cup at the end of an investigation. And so you made that decision in the days and the weeks and the moments leading up to that decision, and talking it through with your husband and with Amy. What was it? What did it take to kind of get through any moments of doubt? As I'm sure there must have been. And what was it like? Because you knew that, okay, well, this is a sure thing. Ghost Hunters is a sure thing. The
hmm
formula works, and I have a career doing this.
hmm
But I am thinking about flipping the script and going it, with
Yeah.
Amy without the rest of the team.
Yeah. uh, I mean, it's complicated. I'm like, is this the moment that I tell the memoir or not? Like, is this, do I do it on this podcast? What I will say is, you know, getting to be on Ghost Hunters was amazing. It was
Yeah.
something that I had watched and I had loved and that I was fortunate to be a part of. To be paired with Amy was probably the best thing that ever happened. I didn't know. I never knew that it was only 6 episodes. Even after I left Ghost Hunters, I didn't know it was only 6 episodes. But because we worked so well together, and the network loved us being together, and they had, there were times when it ebbs and flows, and I had been asked if I wanted to do Ghost Hunters International in the middle of doing Ghost Hunters, and I said absolutely not. And they go, well, what do you mean? You could travel the world. And I said, I want to travel the world on my own dime. I don't want you to fund that because I know that I'm not going to see the things that I want to see. I'm happy being, on
Yeah.
Ghost Hunters.
Yeah.
And so we, she and I basically were traveling all the time. She had just had a child. I was working on building our nonprofit theater company up.
Mhm.
Um, she was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore because the schedule was very hard, and that's true. It was rough.
Mhm.
Uh, we would move locations, and she had a kid, so it was like, how do I get back home? It was very difficult. And I was like, I didn't want to be on the road without her because she and I worked so well together, but we also had a relationship. We hung out afterwards. We hung out with Steve and Dave, but it was very different, right? You
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
your friends that you hang out with, and Steve and Dave did their own things. They were on their own schedules, so were we. And so she was like, "Well, I don't think I can do it anymore." And I was like, "Well, if you're not going to do it, I'm not going to do it."
Yeah.
And that's literally all that it took. And so our manager wrote a curt but brief email about the things that we would require to continue on Ghost Hunters, which was simply uh, a raise,
Yeah.
right, to
Yeah.
what because we've been doing it for so long, and a schedule that we knew at least. I think we said a month in advance.
Yeah.
Just give us a month, right?
Yeah.
And they said no to both of those things. And my manager was like, "Great, we're done." And we saw the email on the outset. We saw it. We literally saw it happen, and we were like, "Oh, okay, it's done. It's over." And so we left, and we had no intention of starting our own show, but people kept asking us,
Oh,
and
really? Okay, so
no, no,
I
no.
didn't realize that, and if I might have read it in the book and
Well, no, no, no.
glazed
The
over
thing
it.
is, I think most people go, "Why not?" They go,
Well,
"What do you mean?"
yeah.
Right? But for us, we wanted to take time, right? Like we had said no to this. I guess, yes, open to other opportunities, but television wasn't necessarily the thing we were looking for.
Yeah.
And I remember someone who I know to this day who was with us day one on Kindred Spirits pitching all the way through to now.
Mhm.
She was walking around Scarefest in Louisville, Kentucky. I think
Mhm.
that's where that's at, asking us, just checking it out, but like asking us, like, what are your things there? And we both were like, who is this? Like, what is going on? We don't like, who is this random woman? And it turned out to be someone who really wanted to know the information. And so our manager was like, listen, if you were to put something on paper, just put it on paper. Let's just see what happens. And we literally wrote down Kindred Spirits. I think our first what we wrote down, I think the heading was something like "Finding Your Roots meets paranormal investigator," or whatever.
Mhm.
And we wrote this whole treatment out, and we said, "This is it. This is what we want to do. We want to show a full investigation. This is how we want to do it." And we pitched it the day after. This is how I remember things. We pitched it December of 2015, the day after Hairspray Live aired. Does that make sense?
We didn't watch it then, but when my
Thank
daughter
you.
was
But
in
listen,
Hairspray, we watched it years later
okay,
and
it aired
enjoyed it.
the night before. I think it was Hairspray Live, and I was like, cool, cool. We flew to DC the next day, met with the team. The meeting was supposed to be. We actually met with TLC first as
Yeah.
like a
Hmm.
runner, as like a warm up.
Yeah.
He did our manager did it on purpose to just get us loose. It's stupid. I mean, it's one of those things where you just sit and you talk about what you want to do. Like, there's
Right.
no pressure to it. Like we thought it was like this big thing. No, it's no pressure.
Yeah.
You sit with someone. And then when we talked to Destination America, the three people that were in that room, it was supposed to be 20 minutes. I think the meeting lasted an hour, and we gave them examples, and it was greenlit 2016 yesterday.
Yeah. Oh.
So
Okay.
Paranormal
Yeah.
Lockdown aired on Destination America.
Hmm.
Amy and I were on the first episode with Katrina and Nick at Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And that afternoon, before that episode aired, they said, it's greenlit. You've got a TV show. That's like literally that's it. And those three people actually stuck with us to the end. I mean, till
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
Except for, like one of those people moved up to the head of Travel Channel, one
Right.
person moved to HGTV, but like the person that was scapping at Scarefest is still right next to us.
Yeah. That's neat.
So we lucked out. And so that's literally how it happened. It was so random and like just meant to be in a way. And it was one of
Yeah.
those things where we were finally going to be able to do something that we wanted to do that showed a paranormal investigation from start to finish how it should be done. When you're digging into research, you're digging into interviews, you're usually using fact, which we did on Ghost Hunters, but they didn't show it. They just didn't show it, right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
wanted to show a full investigation from beginning, middle, and end, but also show both sides of the equation, like helping the living and helping the dead. And
Yeah.
it sort of created this thing. And in the end, when we aired our first season, the head of TLC saw an episode of it, and a month and a half before we were supposed to air on Destination America, called us up and said, "Hey, we're stealing this show for TLC." And so they stole it for TLC, which was, a blessing and a curse in
Yeah.
different ways. But
Of
like
course.
it was meant to be, man. It was just meant to be.
And that's fascinating. I think the journey of, you're sitting eating your mac and cheese or beef stroganoff.
Hamburger helper stroganoff.
Yes.
Let's get it correct.
You're like, yes, I have what it takes, and I'm gonna make a tape. And was it an actual tape that you made? Was it
no.
actual? Okay, I was just curious.
No, it wasn't tape. It was on. That's a good question. I don't even remember.
Because I'm thinking this was
early iPhone.
15. Early iPhone. Okay.
No, this is 20. No. This is
2013.
2009.
Oh, wow.
This is 2009, and that's when I sent in my tape. And then they said tape, but I filmed it on the iPhone because we had iPhones. And they said, we like you, but we're not going to use you for this first season. We think you might be a good replacement. Maybe. We don't know how it's going to go. They were shaking it out. I ended up in the credits of the first season. You can see it's like thousands applied. You see my face in my video. And then it wasn't until the end of 2009. Actually, no, like January of 2010, where they started saying, "Hey, we're doing a season 2. We'd love for you to like go through all this process." The 3.5 pages I cut from the book about that process is for subscribers only, or for a memoir, because that is the craziest thing about television and what that is. We can't even go into it. But like I had to cut that because the editor was like, "This is really great, but let's save it for the memoir." And I was like, "I will save it for whatever feast we're going to have in the future."
Well, I look forward to that. I do have to ask too. Have you, in recent years, have you watched your sizzle reel, your Adam Berry sizzle reel?
Oh, I can. No, here's the thing. I think it's still on my YouTube, but it's private.
Yeah.
I'll have to look. Although I think I looked one time and I couldn't find it. What I do remember about that sizzle was it's literally what you're getting right now. It's
Yeah.
the same thing. I think the only I never said anything crazy. I tried to like show my personality, and I think one of the funniest question mark things I said was like, I want to investigate ghosts, but I don't want to be locked anywhere for 24 hours because if I'm locked somewhere, I need to eat and I'm hungry. Referencing shows where they lock down for the entire night. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So if
Yeah.
that's what this is, I'm out.
Yeah. If there
And
are
for
no
that
snacks,
reason,
I'm not in.
yeah, I was like, for that reason, I'm out. But anything else, I'm down for. And I think what they liked most is that I was like I've always been myself.
Yeah.
It's just, and I think for Academy, that's what the way it was. There was a point where I was like, I'm gonna be myself. I have no say in who wins this. I'm gonna just do what I'm doing, and if I win, great. If I don't, fine. Um, and that's me. Me letting go of that was my in to being just like relaxed about it, being okay with it, taking whatever was happening in stride. Like I didn't care where I didn't feel like I needed to hide my personality, and I
Yeah.
didn't feel like I needed to be quiet. I was like, no way, I'm going to speak out, I'm going to talk about things that I want to talk about, and if they hate that, then they hate that, then
Yeah.
that's not who they want, right? And I think that was the point of that show.
And that can be a real challenge for a lot of people to just say, "Hey, I'm just going to be who I am, and I'm going to not, I'm not going to worry.
Yeah.
Right? I'm
Well,
not going to."
I think the problem is there were a lot of people that really were like walking on eggshells or thin
Mhm.
ice on their own accord, which makes
Yeah.
sense, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't, you know, everybody wants something so bad. And for me, it's like, yeah, I want to win, but I'm not going to compromise who I am to get that.
Yeah.
And so, even Steve and we still have conversations. He's in the book talking about it, but he's like, I just remember
Mhm.
you were genuine. I like looked at your Facebook and you had posts about you and your husband going out and looking for ghosts and nobody else did. Like you had talks about your group that you had created and nobody else did. Like that was just me. And and could I? People are like, would you do anything differently? Maybe I would have honestly. Maybe I would have like come out at the beginning even more.
Mhm.
Well, no, that might have put it. I would have probably just been myself since the beginning, but maybe that would have been my detriment. There was a point where somebody was saying something. I knew they were talking about us and they were doing interviews. And
Mhm.
my friend, one of my dear friends, was producing that show. Who was working? He worked on Ghost Hunters, and that's why I say dear friends because I met him there. But he was also on Ghost Hunters, and he was on Ghost Hunters Forever and Ever. He also worked on Kindred. Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Mhm.
And he said something to me during an interview, and I was like, I don't want to say anything bad about so and so because I think blah 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 blah. And he goes, let me ask you this: do you think that they are saying the same thing you're saying, or do you think they are telling it like they want to tell it? And I paused for 2.2 seconds, and I said, can we roll again?
Yeah. Okay.
And that literally was the moment where I was like, all right, cool. This is what I think, and this is how I feel. And it was one of those, and there was other moments that sort of
Yeah.
progressed that trajectory.
Yeah.
But it sort of, I was like, I got it. If you're at that point, you're giving me permission to be myself, and it doesn't matter in the end what happens because you're going to like me or you're not going to like me.
Right. And I think if that aha moment or that series of aha moments only has served you now throughout your journey as an investigator, as a you know TV personality, because honestly, what I appreciate about you is really what you see is what you get. Whether I'm sitting on my couch watching Kindred on the TV, or whether we're chatting on a podcast or chatting at a convention, and yeah, that's great, and
Yeah.
I love that. And it's nice to see that sincerity be, a cornerstone of your investigations.
Well, and also you don't even see half of it on Kindred because there's not enough time
Mhm.
and it's a very serious show. So when people meet Amy and I, they're like, you guys are real. Like, you guys are so funny. Like, when people come to
Hilarious.
I do this amazing, well, I'd say it's amazing, but I do a real ghost stories talk where I speak in theaters and I tell you real, actual campfire ghost stories that I've experienced. And the most thing that people say is like, the stories are amazing, the way you tell it is amazing. It's so like theatrical, but also, dude, you're funny. Like
Yes.
you could be a stand-up comedian. And I'm like, look, that's who I am as a person. But you now get to see that on ghost shows
Right.
because everything is crossed arms and we're wearing black. Thank God we didn't do that on Kindred. We would wear, I think one day in season 2 or 1, Amy and I unknowingly, because we always would show up kind of matchy matchy without knowing it. She showed up and she had a blue dress with like tiny not unicorns, seahorses all over them. And I showed up in a blue button up with what? Tiny seahorses
That is
all over them?
that's
Like,
beautiful.
makes no sense. But people are like, this is what you're wearing today. And we're like, yeah, it's an interview day. We're going to wear seahorses. So whatever.
And and that says it all. We're gonna wear seahorses,
We're
and
gonna
that
be
says
we're
it
gonna
all.
be real people. Like, ghost hunting is serious business, but you don't have to wear black and look tough all
No.
the time. Like, who are you fighting? These grand this grandmother in a house? Like, what? Who do you think you're about to meet that you need to be like so hardcore? Which, by the way, I don't hate people that do that. I think that's totally fine. Like, it is serious business for a lot of people. It's like they're really getting it. They're maybe some people are really you know fighting against their upbringing and their religion, and they think they need to present
Mhm.
this like that's what helps them not be afraid, or that's what
Yeah.
helps them like find shit. That's totally fine. Can I say the word? I said it. I
Yeah, oh,
said the
yeah,
S word.
yeah,
I said the
absolutely.
S word. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
But to me, it's like it's not that big. It's not that big of a deal, you guys.
yeah.
Like, we can just like be cool and be ourselves and investigate ghosts and still find the same result. You actually get. I mean, I think you get more flies with honey rather
You
than
do.
tar. So
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, and here's the thing. I think, when you look at paranormal as a paranormal media, right? So you've got your shows that are definitely paranormal entertainment,
mhm.
and you are going to be you're showing up to be purely entertained.
Yep.
And then you have your paranormal investigation shows, which is what I feel like you guys really effectively do, while still being very entertaining, but also you're making your audience think and connect to the stories that you're telling. The paranormal entertainment, I feel like there is less there's less storytelling.
It's purely about the what is behind the haunt.
Hmm. Yeah.
What are you actually looking for? And that's what I talk a lot about in my book. It's
Hmm.
who are you speaking to? Yes, the activity can be scary. Yes, you can be frightened. Yes, you can be intimidated. Yes, you can think the energy is so intense that it might be demonic. Chances are it ain't
Probably
that.
not.
But why is the activity happening? Who is on the other side of that conversation? What is their message? What do they need? And what do they want? Because they are just like you. And the goal is to find out those answers, what they need, what they want, why they're here, so that they can better understand their journey at this moment, maybe figure out that they don't need to be here anymore, or that they've got their answers and they can continue on with their journey. There's something that's keeping them here. They're
Right.
stuck, whatever it is,
Yeah.
whether it's unfinished business or whether it's just looking after their family, or not feeling ready to go. But that is the goal. And so for Amy and I, from Ghost Hunters, I think Waverly Hills episode where the nurses were knocking for us, to Kindred, it was, I want to know why the knocks are happening. I don't want to just record the activity and be like, yes, that's really crazy freaking activity. I want to actually know why it's happening because it helps me better understand my own mortality and my grief when I lose someone, which is the book. It's exactly what, those experiences led to, I guess, the pages of the book.
Yeah. And watching Kindred back when we started watching it in like late 2020, was when I had kicked off this podcast. I had been podcasting for years. I write horror books and stories and decided I wanted to do something just, that was, quote unquote, fact based, kind of talk radio style and talk about the paranormal because I had always been interested in it. And I needed that in my life at that time. And so watching what you and Amy were doing out there really got me to thinking, I might like to try this. And my buddy T, we were playing a scary video game together during the pandemic called
Mhm.
Phasmophobia, and we would do it every Thursday night,
I
and
think I think my husband has that on download already.
and we would scream like idiots, and it was
Yeah, for
hilarious.
sure.
And
Phasmophobia.
one day I called him. I said, "Hey, how would you like to try this for real?" And he said, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
Mm.
And so I had seen the Kindred Spirits Belgrove Plantation episode, and that spring, my wife, my daughter Bren, and we went and just did a walking tour of the property, and it was gorgeous, a
Yeah,
beautiful
beautiful.
place. And so I booked a room for T and I there to go in July, and we did our first paranormal investigation there. And but it was because he's a storyteller as well. He's a very talented author, and we just really believe in the power of the word and the power of telling a story. And through telling these stories, these these people, these humans, these lives, these energies live on,
Mhm.
and they should live on because all
Mhm.
these unique, wonderful lives and stories that have passed through these halls and on this planet, you deserve that, right?
Yeah,
Because life is not always easy, and to live life, and you deserve to be remembered.
for sure.
And we started off in the caretaker's house, and it was us, and there was another group there, and that was very much like there was a lot of activity going on. It was very exciting, but it was very two dimensional, right?
Mhm.
It was exciting. It was great. It was our first. We were pumped. But when we came back to our room that night and we closed the door and we started, doing our own investigation, and we were very new at it. But again, just felt this sense of connection just through the questions that we were asking, and we didn't have a ton of interactions, uh, but just when you're in that moment and you're asking these questions and you're trying to create this rapport and
Mhm.
learn these stories or even just know what the emotions are. To
Mhm.
me, that is the very essence of just what makes this experience of going out and investigating so amazing. This
Mhm.
connecting with the unseen and these unseen lives, and I've had moments since. And I'm going to ask you a question about your early EVP experience, but there was
Mhm.
one EVP that I caught. This was back in 2021, maybe. We did this investigation of this site of this just very tragic plane crash here in Virginia, and I and we went out there. We brought flowers, and we were saying that we are here because we don't want your story to be forgotten. And they actually there was a memorial, like a monument there,
Mhm.
a roadside that they moved. The real estate developers moved it or had it moved, and
Wow.
T made it his life's mission to find what happened to it. And it turns out it's in a TWA museum. But then when once he found that information out, we the next weekend we went back out there and we left some more flowers and we say we just want you to know we know where your monument went and that you're not forgotten and we're going to continue to tell your story. But the first day we went out there, we did some daytime investigating and I was out in the woods, and I caught this very clear voice, probably one of the best I've ever caught, and it's a voice saying, "What am I going to do?" It's like, "What am I going to do?"
Mhm.
And it just made me so sad
Mhm.
because so much emotion just came through. in that less than probably a second's worth of audio. And it's just a reminder that, these are lives. If it's an intelligent haunting, and maybe they do need to know that their voice is heard.
Mhm.
And I love when you talk about the crossing over in the book, and very well aligned philosophically with that. There's a reason they're here,
Yeah.
and if they're not asking to get help to get onto the next level, it's not our place to do that. But I think it is our place to give them a voice.
Yeah. What's the amount of investigators that hear an EVP and just take it for what it's saying rather than hearing how it sounds is astonishing to me. I think as investigators, especially when you start thinking of it as you're speaking to those that were just like us that have moved on, they're human beings who are living on this earth that is not made for them, right? It's the earth, the world now that we are living in, that you and I are living in, is not made for spirits. It just isn't. And when you're here, it's hard to communicate, it's hard to act, it's hard to
Mhm.
function, it's hard to get your message out. So to capture an EVP that says what you got, or that says like "help me,"
Yeah.
that says, oh, even the word, like when we were at the Cracker Tavern house and we said, this is your death certificate, you've passed on. And we get an EVP that goes, oh, like the sound that I can hear it in my head.
Yeah.
It's a person. It has inflection. It has meaning.
Yeah.
And I get it. And so when you hear those kind of things as an investigator, A, you instantly need to recognize that who you're talking to is a human being, and B, recognize the intention of the EVP. Yes, those are sad, right? Some of them are confused, right? You
Mhm.
can hear the confusion. Some of them are very angry,
Yeah.
and you can hear it, but like you are talking to a person.
Yeah.
So it's as if somebody who's alive is in front of you is saying those things, and as a person, you go, I hear what you're saying, and I've heard how you are saying it, and then I'm gonna take it in, and I'm gonna make my next move by what you just gave me. Not oh, it said help me. Oh my God, it said help me. That's so crazy. Yes, but it said help me, or
Yeah.
it said if it were to be like help me, you guys, help me, I'd be like that's a very different thing, you know?
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
it's like I think investigators really need to start listening to the tone and the inflection of the. I mean, maybe they are. Maybe a lot of people are. And I just don't know. But that's the key. That's the key to the inside of, or to the insight of who you're trying to communicate
Yeah.
with. That is the key, because that's one of the only things they can give you that isn't like they can't show themselves to you. They can't touch you. But what they can do sometimes is leave you an EVP that gives you an inflection where you get a sense of who they are and why
Yeah.
they're doing it.
Yeah.
The craziest thing that we get always asked about, which I did not talk about in the book because there's no place for it. But they, when we were in Vermont and we're investigating this like carriage house where women were always sort of like felt like they had been. I think it's one of the oldest houses in Vermont, and these women had always felt like a bit uneasy up in the carriage
Yeah.
house, and
Mhm.
it ended up being a swinger, a guy who just wanted an action piece of booty. And he was from this. We figured he's from the '70s. We
Yeah.
assume he is from the when they had a drug habilitation retreat on the
Okay.
property, but we
Uh-huh.
could not find. A lot of those things aren't necessarily published in
Right.
newspapers
Of
and
course.
they're medical records. So we could not find any evidence that this man had died, but he gave us the vibe. Like we were
Yeah.
feeling that vibe. This guy was
Yeah.
like blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and he talked about wanting to have a threesome, but not with me. Clearly, like Amy, like just really crazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we could feel the vibe, and we knew immediately this dude was just a skeeve, not necessarily harmful, was like, this is how you have to act with him. Like, this is how you put him in their place. Yes, his energy is intense. And like any person getting hit on in that way is really inappropriate. And like, you're going to feel that sort of energy.
Yeah.
But now that you know that he's just like a wild and crazy
Yes.
guy,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
like,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
not to reference my, like, if anyone gets that reference, welcome to your 40s or
Yeah.
50s.
Yes. 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 Yes.
But like that's the idea, right?
Mhm.
And so it wasn't necessarily this like negative, bad, demonic dude entity. It's just a dude that liked a good time,
Yeah.
and so it's important to listen to the inflection. And I know you heard it when you got your first CBB. So.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, and here's the thing too. Every time we have been very fortunate as a team to when we go out on an investigation, we usually capture a couple EVPs. Almost hands down anytime we go out. I don't know why, but we do. And every time is like the first time. It
Mhm.
always is just so astounding. And I think, let me see how to phrase this in terms of just, I don't think people are necessarily natural, active listeners, right? I think it
Mhm.
depends on, your upbringing. It depends on your history with relationships and conflict, but it is
Yeah.
all about that. It is, I think, a successful interaction with, that other
Yeah.
is to be an active listener. And
Um,
sometimes active listening is even just about what you're feeling too.
yeah. You know who are really good active listeners? Those that paid a lot of money to get a degree in musical theater, which is what I did.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, it's just that it's so funny to me because people are like, "Oh, you went to school for theater. You've been acting your entire life. You're an actor." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, no, I can act for you. I can absolutely give you a good, musical theater moment." But I'm also like what you just said, an active listener. Like, because that's the whole thing about acting. It's like you are listening to what they're saying, you're responding, and
Yeah.
whatever you've been given dialogue. But like the idea that it's also therapy. It's also
Oh yeah.
being a
Yeah.
best friend,
Yeah.
being someone to a shoulder to lean on, to talk to. It's an ear to bend.
Yeah.
It's those. I think there are astrological signs that are very more adept. I think they're more adept in
Mhm.
paranormal investigation. I'm a Pisces. My birthday is Saturday.
It's coming up, I was gonna
Um,
say.
this Saturday. So it's
Happy
like for
birthday.
me, it's like I think we are really good at just sort of like being that person to kind of dump
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
stuff on, so that and it hopefully we process it through the water and come back and at least pour you a cocktail. Um,
Yes.
but I agree.
Sounds good.
I think active listening in paranormal investigation is very is key, not only for the activity and the spirits interacting with you, but the people who you're working with,
Mm.
uh,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
especially the people you're trying to help. If you're trying to help, like those that own the property, like really listening to what they have to say, really taking it in, and not just surface. Because we always talk about like you can interview somebody and they're going to tell you everything, but you should interview them again because they're going to tell you something new. And it's not that they lied about it; it's because they just didn't think it was important.
Yeah.
um, you know, the episode we did where we show up, like we had talked to them on the phone and we had reassured them, like, we understand what your activity, like, it's not surprising to us. We're going to try to get to the bottom of it. We had interviewed them. We get to their house, and while we're doing the walkthrough, they're like, maybe we should show you the tombstone in the gravestone in the
Yeah.
backyard.
Yeah.
And we're like, what? Just something they failed to mention over the last like 3 months of talking to them.
Yeah.
Oh, you have a tombstone in the backyard. Okay, a gravestone. They're like, okay, cool. Let's go talk about it. But like, they didn't think to mention it because they were like, oh, this can't be it. But for some reason, like it can't be it. And you know what? It didn't have to be it, but it turned out it was. Spoiler
Yeah.
alert. Um, but that's the kind of thing. It's like people omit things, and so it's really about listening, taking it in, digesting it, matching it up to fact, matching it up to evidence, making your own educated decision. Don't jump to
Yeah.
conclusions.
Yeah.
And if you can't find the solution, you can't find the solution. Say it.
Yeah.
Can't find it. I have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. It's admitting you don't know.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. And it's okay to not know. And
100%.
a lot of this is not knowing,
It's
right?
all
Especially,
theory.
yes. And you may, if you have enough in the historical record and enough corroborating evidence from the investigation, then you can craft a pretty solid narrative. And then as my buddy T likes to point out, And then there's always the risk of, crafting a false narrative. And I always say to him, I said, well, I think the safety net for that false narrative is when you're putting the information out there or you're recording a video, being very clear that, as you guys are great, and I know mostly those don't even make it into an episode, but if you're not finding any documentation that supports, the names you're getting on EVPs or through the spirit box, then it's not something you're really going to emphasize.
No,
Right.
and you say it like the biggest example, because people are like, oh, well, you sort of like it's very hard to investigate the way we investigate and not make a narrative
Mhm.
based on what you're experiencing. So you have to use factual information to tie up the reasons why you think the way you think. And that you can't find facts, if you can't find documented evidence in newspapers or interviews or whatever, then your made up narrative doesn't exist. So like one of the biggest examples I have of that is when we did I'm not gonna remember it's gonna come to me. 5, 6, 7, 8. It's in Maryland.
I
It
know,
is
Linville Manor.
Linville Manor. Okay.
Mm.
We did Linville Manor with Wynn and his friend
Win.
Josh. Wynn and his
I love
friend
Win.
Josh.
Mhm.
Actually, Wynn went to high school. Sorry. Wynn went to college with my brother. That is the only reason why we were at that location.
Get out of here.
P to the S. Yeah, I went to the University of North
Get out of
Alabama,
here.
and my brother stayed there with his wife at one point and was like, "When's this is very haunted?" And so I contacted him, and he was like, "Yeah, this crazy shit's happening." And I was like, "Cool, let's go." Like that's how simple it was. Incredible location. The iron spikes stuff where
Yep.
we like
Mhm.
trap a ghost in a room, which is unheard of. What you don't see on that episode, I don't think, was that the man who lived in that house with his father, and he helped his father kind of renovate that home.
Mhm.
We spoke to him in a cemetery, and he talked about how
Are you talking about Old Ben?
old Ben,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
He talked about how before you probably heard the story, before they moved in, there was an escaped convict from the local prison that was nearby, and the story is he came through the side door, which incidentally was where they saw a shadow figure a lot, where we got a stick figure on the SLS
Yeah.
camera walking
Mhm.
towards us and stopping. He broke into the house because the house wasn't locked. He was running from the cops. He got to the front door. They cornered him. They shot him. He died in the entryway.
Mhm.
It's a story that they talk about. To me, the ghost that we captured in that room, or trapped, however you want to say it, we put in timeout, is what I love to
Right.
say.
I like that. Time out.
We put him in timeout.
Let's, so you can think about things and
You
decide,
need to
make the choice of
decide
how you want to be.
whether or not what's happening to you, right? We put him in timeout. And all these other spirits started coming out and talking to us. I did the SS method downstairs where Amy had to run up and get the spikes, and I was saying, "You're
Yeah.
going to die, Amy. I'm going to kill you or something."
Yeah.
Which clearly was this angry gentleman. We 90% were like, "It is this story. It is
Yeah.
this guy." We could not find newspaper articles to corroborate the story. We could not. I mean, there's no documentation. It was so old. Like they aren't going to document it like that. It's just not the
Yeah.
way it worked back then. We looked for death certificates, relatives. I mean, we're not going to get access to the prison records. I mean, it was an intense
Yeah.
but we refused to say 100% that it was him. It would have been so easy
Yeah.
to tie the two together, but we said no, we can't. We don't have factual information that this actually happened, even though these stories have been talked about for years. And
Mhm.
I mean, the activity seems to be matching it up, but we just don't know. We can't say that it's him. And
Yeah.
that is the biggest lesson ghost hunters and people that do paranormal investigation need to understand. Like, even if you are 95% sure you know who it is, if you don't have that piece of information that actually says 100% it is, you can't say it is. And I think maybe we told Wynn and Josh, we think it is, but we didn't show that on television.
Yeah.
Like, that's not something we're going to put on television because, again, there's no facts.
Right.
So that's key. And I love how you know what I'm talking about because you've probably been there.
Yeah. So because of kindred spirits,
Did you go and stay there in the red room?
so we looked it up. And I said, "Holy crap, this is an hour away." So it
Where are
was
you in Virginia, by the way?
we are right outside of Leesburg, Virginia.
Mm.
So we looked it up and said, "Oh, this is so close," and decided that part of our spring break experience with the family and with T's family that we were going to spend the night and do like an overnight investigation at Linville. And we just became fast friends with Win.
Mm.
And we see him every so often. We went to a live what was it called? It was like an interactive theatrical performance that he put on in the house.
It was recent. That was recent, right?
It was very recent, and
Yeah, yeah,
I'm drawing a blank on what it was, but it was incredible. But Win is amazing, and the
yeah.
property is
It's
amazing,
great.
and he did share that story. He did share that story with us, and just remarked that Amy and Adam work so hard at finding all the facts for everything that that they went through
Mhm.
and did in the house, and they just couldn't find anything on this, and so didn't put it in the show. He said,
Well,
but
yeah.
it's a great story.
Well, you bring up Belgrove Plantation. When we were doing Belgrove, we kept looking for information like as to why, caretaker aside, that's a touchy subject, right?
Yeah, of
I
course.
mean, excuse me, the overseer. It's
Yeah,
a touchy
yeah,
subject
yeah,
because an
yeah.
overseer, their job was a certain thing, and um, that aside, we were trying to figure out. But like when we found in a random book a letter from the owner to the governor, the enslaved woman who poisoned the family, who attempted to murder them, but nobody died from it. The idea that she did not get killed, like they didn't kill her, but the owner of the property, wrote to the governor and said her husband is with you or at another plantation.
Mhm.
I want you to send her with her husband, put them back together, and send them to the Caribbean. They think they probably ended up in Alabama because it
Yeah.
was cheaper to put them there, and they still get paid the same.
The Caribbean of the South, right?
The
Of the
Caribbean
Southern
of the
United
South,
States.
exactly. But like when we brought that information and brought those letters to the Library of Virginia, the State Library of
Yeah.
Virginia, they were like, "We had no idea this existed. We had no idea this existed. Thank you." First and foremost, they were like, "Thank you for finding this information," and then they were like, "We are in the process of trying to piece together familial ties from people that are living now to people that were living then, and this is something we did not know about, and this is incredible because this is just so out of character for what would have happened in the time."
Yeah.
But we found that as paranormal investigators and like gave it to them, and they were like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, this is incredible!" Right? Just because it showed history, it showed something that is hard to talk about that should have never have happened, and they are trying to document it. But this was sort of lost in these inside of these books that we randomly were going through to try to figure out the information, and it just
Yeah.
happened. And I honestly, I feel like it was meant to happen. It
Yeah.
was like their spirits were like, no, 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 this story needs to be told too.
Yeah.
And it was like, here's the story, which is incredible.
It's amazing. I mean, those moments have just got to be so exhilarating.
Yeah,
Eh,
yeah. It's almost more fun. Those moments are almost more fun than actual paranormal investigating
yeah.
because because what you're doing is I talk about it a lot. I keep saying the book, but I talk about it a lot in terms of like when you're reaching out to those that have passed on and you find something about them that is so interesting and fascinating, you're bringing them back to life. They're alive. They are living. Their spirit is here. Like you feel them. It's there. And so it's like, we are, as
Yes.
paranormal investigators, you are constantly bringing people back to life in a way that isn't like they're standing in front of you, but their memory and their existence lives now. So
Yeah.
they're alive in a sense. And I think that to me is so much more powerful than sitting in the dark and saying, can you knock on something? Can you make something move? Yes, please do those things, right? I've seen some crazy shit. Like, please do those things. But also, like, what's on the other side of that activity? Who are you? Can I help you? And then when you figure it out, they're sort of they're here. They're now alive
Yes.
300, 400 years later
Yes.
in your
Yes.
space, which I'm obsessed
Yeah.
with.
And that moment is when you feel such a pure moment of connection.
Hmm. Hmm.
It is, and it's enough to take your breath away. I mean, I find that those moments, like you said, they don't necessarily happen on the investigation, but you might, be listening through, reviewing evidence, and then you come across this EVP, and then you see it corroborates with some other devices going off, and then it ties in to this story of this person, and it floors
Yeah,
you, and
it's
it's
incredible.
yeah,
It's incredible.
it's amazing. So we're kind of winding down. I've kept you for overtime, but I'm going to keep you for a little
Listen,
longer.
it's fine.
It is a very the way that you guys investigate and the way that you investigate, again, it is, you are emotionally investing yourself in the investigation, in the families, in the spirits. One investigation comes to mind was the and now I can't remember the name of the episode, but with Sarah Lee and
Yeah.
Nancy.
Nancy.
And that episode actually moved me to tears.
Mm.
And I just felt it wasn't even just what was being portrayed on the episode, but just this feeling just seemed to come through with what was going on there. And I'm actually talking to Sarah Lee later this week for the show because I met her. We connected at Paracon last year. Delightful person, but is it tough sometimes when you're off the road and it's the quiet investigation season, so for you and your husband to go out and do your thing, which I love, and but is it tough sometimes to shake off some of those very emotional moments that you have during filming the season where things get intense and emotional? Because I know those things have got to stick with you,
Mhm.
some of those moments, and there's because I know there've been some very positive moments, and there've been some
Mhm.
very sad moments. And
Yeah.
as a feeling human being, how do you process so that it is something that you can, put in that box and put on the shelf
Yeah.
and know it's there, it's not forgotten, but it doesn't linger.
Yeah. I think we compartmentalize a lot of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think when we used to talk about when we first started doing Kindred Spirits, especially like the first two seasons, she and I, because we both suffer from some form of anxiety. I mean, who doesn't these days? Um,
Preach.
but it was just very hard to talk about death like that in so like so frequently, and there were synchronicities that sort of like came up in our investigations that matched our own lives, and it was hard to like process. And um, so I think my book is a lot of those processes, right? I
Yeah.
think my book is a lot of that. Which it's so funny when I told Amy that I was like, yeah, I'm going to write a book, and it's going to be about dealing with grief and death. And one of our first thought was like, oh my God, that's amazing. But we get to talking as friends too, and she's like, you're going to be really anxious. I mean, that's going to be a really anxious thing for you to do because you're just talking about death and death and death and death. And I was like, I know, girl. Um, so we're aware of it, right? And so I think we sort of put it in little boxes. I see ourselves as we're there to do a certain job, right?
Hmm.
And whatever the job is, whatever the task is not destined by us. It's destined by those that are seeking the answers from the
Yeah.
afterlife.
Yeah.
So we receive the information, we give the information, and that's as surface as we are going to get. When it breaks through the surface, such as Nancy's episode,
Hmm.
and Amy's getting emotional and I get emotional, or we're at the Undertaker's house. Excuse me, we're at the house in Cornell, New York, where the first
Oh,
electric chair happens,
yes. Yeah.
and it
Hmm.
turns out to be this little old lady who is just afraid, and I break down. Like those moments are when we can't put it in its cubby without processing what's actually happening. So, and I don't think of us as like first responders or anything like that at all
Hmm.
whatsoever. But I imagine when people do these jobs where they're rescuing people, saving lives, and they come upon scenes of like just
Yeah.
whatever, there has to be a part of themselves that focuses on the job and does it and like
Yeah.
it gets to them. Yes, at times, right? And so I see it a little like that, but not the same. Clearly, we are not the same. We are not the same.
Right.
But it's like that. And so the Nancy episode definitely stuck with us. Amy, it stuck with her. It's like, I mean, she talks about it a lot. Uh, I talk about it, and it sounds so cliche, like live every day to your last, like live in the moment,
Yeah.
like, but it's true. It's true, and it's coming. No wonder it's a cliche. No wonder it's something like, oh, everybody says that. Of
Yeah.
course they do, because look at the millions and billions of people that have come before you. They know what they're talking about. And so when I talk
Yeah.
about the way that spirits are paving the way for those that are yet to follow, it's the
Yeah.
same concept.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how we work on it. I'm not going to lie. A lot of the evenings we go back to the hotel. She'll have a glass of wine. I'll grab a vodka soda. We'll sit in the lobby with our crew and be like, whoa, that was
Yeah.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
As a group, we'll digest it. We'll talk about it. She
Yes.
and I, Amy's always on her computer researching. I'm looking at my computer to see if I can find any other information. Like, this is how we process it as a group. Like, no one's left alone to process it by themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's a healthy amount of talking to each other about it, but also knowing when it's okay to kind of shut off from that world. And people are like, well, what do you do? Well, we travel a lot. Like, I run a theater company. We find other things that we can do. I put my anxieties and my thoughts and feelings in a book,
Hmm.
so that I get it off my chest. So I'm
Yeah.
not sitting with those thoughts. And I think it's healthy. And so when people talk about ghost hunting, I enjoy and I still very much love going to a haunted place for the thrill of the activity that I'm getting. It is very hard for me to not want to find out why the activity is happening when I'm there, but sometimes I don't have enough time. I have
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
3 hours, 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
So, in a way, that's a blessing because I don't get wrapped up in the lives of the dead,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I also cherish the times that I do because it helps me grow as an individual. It helps me understand this life. It helps me understand someone's reasoning in the afterlife. It puts it into perspective, more so than I think personally religion can do. It's more than just like, this is what the afterlife is, and I'm telling you because this book says it. It's more like, no, this is what the afterlife is because you are experiencing it and you're taking that information. You are seeing it for yourself. It's not for someone else to tell you. Look around you. This is what's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be very difficult, and I encourage people to find, those of you who investigate a lot, like, find hobbies, find things that you love to do, watch silly, scary movies that
Yeah.
take you out of it, because it can be very intense and very
Yeah.
deep.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I just love that you all decompress as a team. That's huge because it's
Yeah,
it's it's it's
I mean, and
talk
mostly,
therapy with cocktails, and it's
right, but mostly it's our crew it's our crew going, what the was that? How is that even real? Like, what does that make any sense? Like, when we did the Crocker Tavern episode and we
Mhm.
decided to go out to the train tracks and we did that experiment where I stay back at the house and like the train arm goes off
Yes.
and things are blowing up. It's one of our most talked about episodes.
Yes.
We, Amy and I stayed at the Crocker Tavern House that evening because the reveal the next day was like 10 a.m. and
Yeah.
I live nearby. I live like an hour away.
Yeah.
Actually, they're one of my dear friends, and actually I was at their house like, what, 2 weeks ago. So all that to say, like, we stayed there, but our showrunner, who is the one that's taking the notes and making
Mhm.
sure that the editors has start to finish how everything happens, and one of our camera operators stayed up the entire night from like 1 at night, 1 a.m., 2 a.m.,
Wow.
to 10 in the morning, taking both camera footages, putting them together side by side, watching them. Like, they were so obsessed with it. And we woke up the next day and I come downstairs for this reveal, and Amy looks at them and Amy goes, "You didn't sleep, did you?" And they're like, "No, no. Okay, so no. Okay, so." And they're like so
Yeah.
excited because they were just like, "Oh my God," right? So that also happens. Like, like, they're so they're not there to find ghosts. They're there to film us finding ghosts. But when they get involved in it, it becomes like something. It's almost too much to handle.
Well, and that's the thing. It's funny because I said to my wife, this was I think last year. I'm loading up the car. We're going up to Gettysburg. It's like 9 o'clock at night. We're
Yeah.
headed up to the Jenny Wade house, and we're like putting all the gear in the car. And I just look at her. I said, it's funny. Like, not too many years ago, I was like putting guitar amps and microphone stands into the back, but it's similar that
For that
exhilaration you
midnight gig. For
yeah,
that
yeah.
midnight gig.
Yes,
Yeah.
for two people maybe sometimes, but
Yeah.
but that exhilaration when you are on a stage and you are connecting with your bandmates or your cast members, and it's
Mm.
this sort of this unconscious communication that's more about just feel, and you finish the show and you're just exhilarated and you just feel like when it's a really good night, like you've transcended in some way.
Mm.
And I feel that way after some investigations when we're grooving as a group and the space is reacting, and it's just there's a come down period where you're just like, ah, yeah,
How
yeah,
right? How do you even? And I think what's really the takeaway is when you start doing it long enough, or when you start realizing who you're talking to. I think the easiest way to come down is to process it in terms of like, what is the lesson that I was supposed to learn from the night? So
yeah,
you take it away. You're like, the activity was crazy. That was crazy. I can't understand. Like, that's so wild. But instead of focusing on the adrenaline, which is addictive, you focus on, okay, well, what was I supposed to learn from that? And you're not going to, maybe you won't figure out that day, but like writing it down, talking about it. I think my biggest takeaway from all the investigations that I've done is like that there is something else. There is something
hmm,
else. There is something else. People can call it different things. People can label it however they want, but there is something else after this life. And that gives me hope. So when you're dealing with grief, when you're dealing with loss, um, it is a way for you to say, they can be here with me. They could be. They may reach out. There is something else that they just don't end. Like there's something beyond this existence, and I think that's a really great takeaway for people who have a hard time shutting down after a case. It's like, well, what's the lessons that I'm supposed to learn today?
yeah,
What did I learn from this activity? Like with Nancy, it's live every day to to the fullest. With the old lady at the and Corning, New York, is don't judge a book by its cover. Like
yeah,
that person was terrified and didn't mean anything. For Wilhelmina at the Crocker Tavern House, it was she didn't know that she had passed away, and she was still sort of like reliving this environment. And it took however many years later for people to like the luck that she has that people stepped in to be like, Wilhelmina, it's okay, you're
yeah,
fine, it happened, and you can go. And she says, I'm going home. Like
mm,
it's
yeah,
it's it's intense. It's intense and powerful and bigger than I think people realize it. And
yeah,
again, it's still
yeah.
okay. It's okay to look for ghosts for the fun of it. I love that. I do it all the time. I mean, I do it all the time. But I think for me personally, and for Amy, and for a lot of the people that watch Kindred that investigate ghosts on the regular, I think we're sort of moving beyond just the experience. It's more about the why and the where, and how can we assist and facilitate
Yeah.
those people in the afterlife.
Yeah, and I'll add one to that too. I think it's this realization of coexistence,
Mhm.
right? Uh, I I think it's safe to say, spirits are pretty much all around us, and look for the signs. You might be surprised. I know the first time we had something come back with us, I was very surprised. I said,
Mm.
"No way!" But I wasn't scared.
Yeah,
I was surprised.
yeah.
2 years ago, I experienced a profound loss, like sudden, unexpected loss and grief like I have never felt ever.
Mm.
And but at the same time, I had been doing the paranormal thing for quite some time. In fact, this was a person she and I regularly talked about, the adventures that we were having and going
Yeah.
out and things we were doing, and we would have these philosophical conversations about reality and the universe. And not long after, I had experiences where I felt like she was very much present, especially moments when I really needed her.
Mm,
And as recent as the last 2 weeks, there were a couple things that had happened that I knew, hands down, like this person had popped in just to let me know, hey, I'm still here.
yeah,
Even if I'm not present physically, or even if spiritually I'm not in the area, I'm just a thought away. And you remember what those conversations felt like, and being, feeling safe, and remember what that felt like. And I don't think I would have been able to even access any of that had I not explored oh, geez, what is that?
sorry. Fuck. I'm sorry. Your statement is amazing, and maybe this is your friend being a dick, but I hate bugs so
Yeah.
much. Tell me how a bug is living in the world when it's winter, and I really need. It's a stink bug too, so
Oh, they are the
if
worst.
I crush it, it's gonna smell. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm gonna take it as a sign as your friend. Your friend is on this poster,
Yes.
and she's in a
Hey,
like that's literally a sign.
hey.
I'm not even joking. Like how is that
I don't know. How is that? But see?
existing? It is 32 degrees. Isn't been it is I'm in New England. It is so
Yeah.
cold. Bugs aren't existing. I'm
No.
gonna text my husband right now for a napkin of some kind.
Yes, yes, a stink
Uh,
bug removal implement.
please, because
Oh,
what's
it's
your
on the
friend's
move.
name?
So her name was
Well, I'm not gonna pretend like this is your friend, but like if all I'm gonna say is I'm not gonna kill it. We're gonna wrap it into a thing and we're gonna take it outside. If it flies onto do you edit this? Can I go get a napkin?
Oh, you can go. I do edit
Oh,
this.
he's gonna
I
bring me a
do edit.
napkin. We're talking about his deceased friend and this stink bug, Ben. How does a stink bug in the winter show up? I need to can we get it outside? Look, we can't kill his friend. They aren't friends.
Oh, this is amazing.
Oh my god! Oh! Okay, here. Will you let it outside? It could be his friend. We don't know. We don't know the things. He rolled his eyes. He left. So he was like, whatever.
I love
Okay.
it. I love it.
I'm sorry
That's
like
fine.
your story is beautiful, and I totally agree with you. I think there are moments, especially for those when we experience a loss such as that, where you're not necessarily looking for the signs, but when they happen, they're bizarre, and then you just know that it's them. You just know that they're here. It is. I apologize for me jumping and being like, "Get away from me, flying insect." But that's weird. Okay,
That is weird.
sorry, that's
That is weird.
weird.
It is
That's
weird.
weird. And to be, I hate when people say to be honest because they're not being honest, and so I'm not going to say that. This is the fourth Zoom thing that I've done where I'm like doing a podcast
Yeah.
or doing something, and the activity has happened either where I'm at or where they're at specifically. It's the fourth time in the last month. So I don't know what kind of energy we're putting up in this guest room, but
Hey,
I don't know what to say about it.
it's on brand at least. At least it's on
Thank
brand.
you. Thank you. But yeah, no, but I agree with you, and not to undermine what you were saying from a stink bug, but I think there are signs, there are things that we receive, and as paranormal investigators, we hope that those who are in the paranormal that have passed on will come back. And to be honest, most of them don't.
No.
And I think the reason why is because they're done. Like there's nothing else for them to say. It's like Houdini's the biggest culprit of them all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like he was like, I'm going to
Yeah.
come back if I can. But I think the reason why he didn't come back was because he was such a skeptic and he didn't believe it. And I think he was like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And if I can do it, I'm going to come back. You're not going to be able to do it, Houdini. You don't believe it. You've
Right.
set it
You set
up for
that
yourself,
intention, right? Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Exactly.
think, yeah, I think there are positives and negatives to both, and I think that's a beautiful story about your friend for sure.
Yeah. And I think, again, you stated so eloquently in the book, I was raised, Italian Catholic, and
Mm.
But now at this stage in my life, especially with what I've experienced in the last however many years, I could say I'm a very spiritual person, and I have my beliefs, and I'm more spiritual now than I've ever been, and find so much comfort in it.
Yeah, for
And so
sure.
I think that's
For
just
sure.
a brilliant side effect of doing something that is just really cool and fun.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's why I wanted to put it down in a book. That's why I wanted to put it down on paper. And I was, people say to me like, well, my editor specifically, she was like, who has been the most wonderful person I've ever
Yeah,
worked with. Um, she, I was like, this is what I think now. This is what I think now. 10 years from now, we're going to have to do a part two, because everything is theory.
yeah,
It always changes. But this is what I think now. And if anyone can find any comfort or peace or solace or information in this, then I'm fine with it. And it's been, the book is literally, it's gotten reviews and really great critiques from people who love paranormal, from people who have never, who are not in the paranormal, who are just like looking for other outlets, from people who love good ghost stories that don't really need the grief and loss part, but they like
right,
love good ghost stories. And then from those who like love history and the aspect of like the what if, people that are very religious, even like there's a whole religion chapter where I delve in, and we had to be very careful because we were like, we don't want to alienate anyone.
yeah, of course.
And for me, I was like, I'm telling the truth, right? I'm telling the truth based on the scripture as it was written for the people at the time. Nowhere does it say ghosts don't exist. So
I
let's talk
love that
about it.
section too. I was like,
Yeah, it's my
"Holy
favorite.
crap!"
It's my favorite.
That's
That section changed. That section of the book changed me as a person, because I grew up Southern Baptist, and there were times in my life where I was like, "What if I'm getting it wrong?" Especially when I get the anxiety and the weird, like, "What if I'm getting
mhm,
it wrong? What if I'm getting it wrong?" And that chapter, 100% was like, I had to do the research, and I had to talk to the experts, and I had to look at the text from the biblical perspective for the people that were, it was written for the people at the time. And like, no, I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong at all. I'm not wrong at all. This has existed for longer than the Bible has existed. Like, this is, what are you talking about? Like,
yeah,
no, 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 no. I am not wrong. And if you say that every time we speak to a ghost, it's a demonic entity, you are being told lies, and you are propagating something that is not true at all
yeah,
whatsoever.
yeah.
Um, Whatever. We could talk about that. That's
Oh
a
my
whole
gosh,
other
that's a
podcast.
whole other show.
And
Yeah,
we have
which
no time. We're
we
running out.
we're burning the midnight oil, as they say. I mentioned at the top of our discussion that there were some curious coincidences as I was reading the book. By the way, read it, beautifully written. I know why people are enjoying it. Then I listened to it through Audible because I'm a big audiobook nerd, and you did a fantastic job with the
It's one of my.
narration.
It's my. I. It was the hardest thing I've ever done was the audiobook, but I enjoyed it more than anything because I get to like sort of use that $150,000 private
A
college
bit of the
training,
theater. Yes, yes,
the
yes.
theater voices, to like bring you into the moments.
Yeah.
And I really wanted the stories to be very narrative and
Mhm.
dropped in, and I wanted the information to be given in a fun, uplifting kind of. I don't know. I don't know. I have a crazy story about that whole experience. I don't know if we have time, but
Drop it on me. Drop it on me. We'll make
so
time. If you have time,
I'll just tell it very briefly.
you can give the high level version. Yeah, perfect.
So the uh, dream is death
Mhm. Mhm.
chapter, where
Yep.
you are dream visitations and you are getting your friends who or your family visiting you in dreams. So my friend Yvette, she was having the dream about her friend uh, Patrick. I
Yes.
think
Yep.
that was his
Mhm.
name, and because I
Mhm.
changed his name.
Right.
And so I'm talking about Patrick. So I am. They said you can record the audiobook in New York, and I was like, I live on the Cape. I want to be near Boston. It's the summer. It's going to be hard for me to get off the Cape anyway. Like, can we just figure it
Oh, and
out?
doing that summer commute
Oh
from
yeah, no, no, no. And I
no,
was like going to stay overnight, but like still,
no.
nobody wants to be on the road for 5 hours. So I said, they were like, oh, there's a place in Arlington. There's a place in Arlington that you can go. And I said, great. And so I showed up, and so I spend 3 days um, only 5 hours a day because they don't like to do too long because your voice gets tired.
Yeah.
And I spent 3 days with this guy. And what's interesting is I went to the Boston Conservatory. He went to Berkeley. Berkeley and Boco shared a cafeteria. We had some of the same friends. It was like he graduated in 2004. I graduated in 2005. Just very similar, like, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it helped us bond as people who are going to be in this studio doing this book. And he was hired to do this book. We talked about the lunch lady that we remember. Like, it's so stupid, right? And so we get to the end. We get to like the end of day 3, and he was like, he's like, I take August off because I want to spend time with my kids and my family before they get back to school. But my partner at the company, he's going to take over. He's great. I was like, oh, that's so great. I was like, but I'm sad because we just did the first like section of chapter 11. I was like, it's such a really great story about like dream visitations. He was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, my friend Yvette. And I go into the story and I'm starting to talk about her friend who had died unexpectedly on April Fool's, and everybody thought it was a joke. And he was an incredible guitar player at Berkeley. And he went to New York and went to another school. And like Yvette went to Berkeley, and that's how I knew her because all
Yeah.
of my friends were together. And I was like, can I change his name? And she came, and it was like, he came to her in a dream 3 different times. This is what he happened. This is what he said. And then I was like, can I change his name to Patrick because I wanted to make sure the family. And he looks at me and he goes, Peter? And that's not the real name, but he says his real name. He goes, Peter. And I was like, yeah, Peter. And there was some mystery around his death, and the family acted like it wasn't like an accident. And then it randomly snowed at the memorial. He goes, yeah, I was at the memorial. It snowed. And so I wait, and he goes, Peter was my best friend. He was supposed to play my wedding 2 weeks after he died. He goes, I was like, did you know Yvette? And then I mentioned Yvette's partner, and he goes, I knew him, but Peter had 2 separate sections of friends. Like there were these friends and these friends, and I was part of this other section. So Yvette got this dream and told all of these friends, and there was an entire group of friends that sat over here that did not know any of the answers, did not know anything.
Yeah.
So the idea that I am sitting in a studio with his best friend out of the thousands of places that I could have gone, that he hears the story and immediately he knows the story and all of that other group of friends knows the story. That is much bigger than any of us think. Like that was planned. I even talk about it in the book. I was like, maybe even he knew that I was going to be friends. He knew I was friends with Yvette in the future, and I was going to be doing this, and I was going to write this book. And now you know the story. Little did I fucking know.
It's crazy.
It's actually it's even bigger than that. The guy, he would have never picked up that book. He would have never gotten that book off a shelf. He was hired to do this job, and it happened to be his best friend, and he gets this story. So he went home, he read the entire chapter, and he texted me later, and he was like, I'm finishing this book out with you. I have to do it for him. And so we finished the book together. I was like, but doesn't that literally just blow your mind?
How does it happen? How do these things happen?
I don't know, but those of you, just buy the paperback when it comes out, because that story is going to be in there narrated within an inch of its life. Crazy. Yes. I mean, that's crazy to me. I mean, that's a crazy story that doesn't make any sense. And if that shows you the idea around spiritual connection and like things, synchronicities and things being put in place, like he knew so much more. I mean, maybe there's something else that's going to happen. Like maybe there's something else that's going to show up. But like, I called Yvette immediately afterwards, and she was scared. She was like, oh my God, well, what did he do? And I was like, no, he's excited. I called my editor about it, and she was like, I'm sitting on the floor. She's like, I had to sit down on the floor because I don't understand what this means. And I was like, that's the point. That is the point of the paranormal.
Yeah, that is the point. Beautifully said.
Don't look behind you.
I can look at my okay, here we go. The 3 coincidences that popped up as I was reading the book, and then we're gonna get to the don't turn around question.
Okay.
So you lived on Bluff Street as a young buck in your first experiences.
Yeah.
My first attempt at paranormal investigation was solo at a battlefield very close by to where I live called Balls Bluff.
Okay.
And it was going there that I knew that I had to do this.
I like that.
You drop in a quote from The Baker's Wife
Of
in
course.
Into the Woods.
Of course.
My daughter, my oldest daughter, Bren, is playing the baker's wife in her school's production of Into the Woods.
I could not. There are a couple of nuggets in that book that if you really look hard enough, you're going to get musical theater and
Yes.
or
there
might be a Beetlejuice quote. Somewhere.
Yes, there was. And then finally, you're talking about your friend, and it's spelled differently, and it's a guy, but the name was, which again, I'm like, oh, there you go. Okay, and it came in threes, and I'm sure there were more there, but I'm sure wanted to share that with you.
That's cool.
Could be coincidence, which is fine. Coincidences are a whole lot of fun as well.
I love that.
So we are at the point of the show where your earpiece is no doubt probably running low on battery.
Well, this one has stopped. This one's definitely stopped.
So we have a tradition ending this show with the don't turn around question, which I gave you a little heads up on. It could be taken very literally. It could be interpreted, figuratively. And I'm just going to flat out just ask it with little fanfare, and you answer however you see fit. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Yeah, because I have to be honest, I didn't read the question, so I'm ready.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, you'll love this. All right. Adam, do you turn around?
I mean, there's so many thoughts going through my brain. It depends on the scenario. Okay. Is there a sound? Yes, I'm going to turn around. Are we Eurydice? We're not turning around. Okay. Like, what are the stakes? So, yeah, of course, I think, yes, I'll turn around unless I've been specifically told not to turn around.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. That makes sense. And it still amazes me after several years of doing this show that everyone has a very, a distinct answer to that question, which I just love asking it.
God, why did he turn around? Why did he turn around? God bless.
God bless.
Why did he turn around? Oh, so sad.
If only we can ask.
One day.
One day. Adam, Barry, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. I could have done this all night. Hopefully we can do this again sometime, because there are just so many different avenues that I wanted to go down in our chat. And this is me being disciplined.
Thank you. Please. We'll have to do a part 2 later.
For sure. Now, please tell my listeners where they can find out about the amazing things that you're doing, about the theater company, about your book, of course. Where can we get our fix of Adam Barry and his various creative outlets?
Well, if you really need to know, you can go to adam-barry.com. That has all of my events and books and all of those things there. AdamBarryMerch.com has my ghost line, which is this, includes this ghost t-shirt and fun things that I love. Please pick up the copy of the book anywhere books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you want an autographed copy, you can get them on my website, and just follow me on social media. I'm everywhere. If you Google Adam Barry, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever, it's going to be one of the first come up. I'm not the baseball player, and I'm also not the guy who writes music for South Park. So once you I'm everyone else. I'm not those two. Just follow me on on the socials, and we'll have fun.
Beautiful. Well, Adam, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
And to you, my listeners, thank you so much for being part of this incredible community. Without you as listeners out there, this show wouldn't be possible. You are the ears for which we are telling these stories. So thank you so much for your support, your reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those great places. It's a privilege to be able to share these moments with all of you, and we'll see you next time.
We just don't know what really causes this phenomenon. So it's been going on for a very long time, but every time